Kelminskiene, the stage is yours.
Hello! Ooh, I sound loud. Okay, I get used to my voice now. Welcome, everybody. Please take your seat. Nice seeing you here today. You have some gifts on your chairs, so you don't have to do anything with them right now. Don't worry about it. Don't start reading. So, my name is Agne, and what I do for life, I help organizations build better products and better teams. And we do that together through experimentation. So today, I'm going to share my personal stories and practical tips that worked for me and my organizations I worked with to ask better questions so we could get better answers, right? The question we ask lead to the answer we get. And if we want to innovate and we want to experiment, it's important what kind of hypothesis we set. So the session will be about that. The content will be built on top, so stay with me. And now I want to get to know you a little bit better. So can you raise your hand if you have ever participated in discussion about improvement? How to improve your team performance, product, organization? Okay, quite a lot of you. Expected. Now, can you raise your hand if this discussion was mostly about how to reduce errors, about what went wrong and how to prevent that from happening in the future? Looking for root cause, what was wrong? Okay, a little bit of you. So I want to share a story about Motorola. I'm pretty sure you know the company. In 1980s, Motorola was facing fierce competition from foreign markets, mostly from Japan, actually. And they were actually losing. Their products, most of the time, were worse quality. They had a lot of errors in their processes. So they got together and we started talking, how do we build and maintain high-performing organization? How do we beat this competition? And they came up with this idea that they have to improve their performance. And they came up with this ridiculous number, 99.99966 success rate. This number cannot tell a lot without examples, so let me give it to you, okay? So if you are delivering packages and you have 300,000 of them, success rate of 99% would still mean 3,000 packages misdelivered. For me, 99% success rate sounds pretty good. But 3,000 packages still misdelivered? Well, so the program Motorola came up with was called Six Sigma. And with that program, we managed to reduce this number from 3,000 to 1. That's what it meant, reducing errors close to zero. Hardcore, right? Of course, corporate world loved it. A lot of companies started using that. Results were great. The problem, though, they looked at short-term gains and forgot to look at long-term cost. And in 2006, Fortune reported that actually companies who adopted Six Sigma, 91% of them failed to keep up the pace with S&P 500 index, which stands for overall market health in the United States, right? So why so? Apparently, to keep your performance high, reducing errors is not enough. Performance improvement is a delicate balance, which has one part, yes, reducing errors, right? So we need to know what kind of things can go wrong and mitigate the risk. Right? But on the other side, and this is why I said that this is a delicate balance, we need insights. We need to think about future, what we're going to do. Right? And there's really nothing wrong about standards. It's okay to feel in control. You need some documentation. You might need some reviews. Fine. But we also should think about culture. How can we be curious about the world around us? How can we spot contradictions? How can we connect dots and make synergies out of them? And I'm saying it's a delicate balance because, of course, each of your contexts is different. So for some companies, it might be more about reducing errors and addressing uncertainty. For some companies, it might be more about innovation. But I've never seen a company or heard about one, and I read a lot, that wouldn't need innovation at all. Now, before we explore innovation, let's stop for a second, because we hear this word quite a lot, and I really want to calibrate on what it means. So when I say innovation, I mean a new idea that we manage to bring to the market, and then once people try it, they don't want to get back to their old ways, right? It should change our behavior somehow. It should change the pattern of how we solve a problem, and it's innovation. And to do that, we need three things. We need desirability, so that the problem we're solving would be real. I mean, of course, most likely people don't know the solution yet. That's fine, we'll bring it for them. But the problem should be real, that there is a desire to address that problem, to solve it somehow. There is feasibility. We should be able to bring this idea to the market, technical-wise. And viability, we should bring a business case out of it, right? Of course, maybe you can finance it from your pocket in the beginning, but long-term, it won't be viable if it's not a business case. And if we manage to hit these three, this is a sweet spot. A good example of that is actually electric vehicles. How many people you know in your bubbles who own an electric car and then later would switch back? That's what I thought. Maybe you just don't know people who own electric cars, but I don't care. Still works. Good example. Actually, I don't remember exact numbers now, but really, really rare occasion people switch back once we try electric cars. And Tesla is also a good innovation example, right? Innovative company. We make 60 production changes every day. And to not make their system too complex, we reduce 61 or more things from the system every day. That's a really interesting approach, right? OK, so we know what innovation is. And the best companies, they want to innovate. And to innovate, they need to experiment, right? Because if we don't try things, how do we know if this idea is good or bad? You know, we cannot run innovation by our gut feeling only, because in that case, that wouldn't hit the description of innovation, right? So if we spend all this time and money, and when I say all this time, I mean thousands of experiments per year, like Google, like Amazon, like P&G, it doesn't have to be a technology company. How do we make this time we spend on experimenting worthwhile? So here comes experiment design. So this is your blueprint. This one you can use, OK? First of all, you need to understand the context. And why statement sounds very Seneca-ish, but that's not about that. Why statement is about understanding if you have a good reason to prioritize the problem you are trying to solve. And I failed there once. I can share that. I was in a situation years ago where I onboarded to a company. They asked me to work with specific teams. And I observed one team, and I could very fast tell that they were very, very tired. They were working after hours. They were close to the burnout. And, you know, there is one of Agile principles, sustainable development, right? So my gut feeling said it's the right thing to do. We need to experiment to solve this. It's the right problem to solve for a team because they cannot go this pace for long. So I started working with stakeholders because it's a systemic thing. The team cannot just reduce their workload by themselves. In that case, they couldn't. And then one team member came to me and he's like, Agne, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm helping you. And he's like, no, you're not. Apparently, the summertime was coming, and a typical way for that team was to work a lot of after hours in springtime, because that was the way for them to get a lot of money and bring their families on vacation. That was a typical thing. I didn't know that, right? So my gut feeling said that it's the right thing to do, but nobody really wanted to prioritize that problem. And of course, that gave me other information to work with and, you know, solve problems around it. But at that time, that wasn't the right experiment to run. So when we think about it, the start, we need to know why we're doing that and why we think it's the right thing to do. Now, we have this reason. We should be open with ourselves. What does it mean to succeed with this experiment? And I want you to admit for yourself, like each of you, that success will not necessarily mean verifying your idea. If you manage to disqualify your assumption using actual data, this is a huge step forward. That's fine. Now I know what's not working. The only way you can fail your experiment is not being able to conclude any of it. If you do not create a learning opportunity for yourself, then that it means that you failed experiment. And that can happen for multiple things. For example, if you do not control your status quo, right? So we'll talk about that a little bit. Single falsifiable hypothesis. Single, because if you test multiple things all at once, you will not be able to make a conclusion. You will not know which of these things actually caused the effect. Falsifiable, because it's scientific method, right? So we cannot use experimentation to prove which philosophical theory is better. We cannot use experimentation to prove that fairy tales exist, okay? Yeah, fairies exist, maybe. So that's the thing. It should be falsifiable. We should know exactly in advance what things will mean that we verify idea and what things will mean that we disqualify idea. And to do that, we need metrics, and not just metrics, but key meaningful metrics. So a rule of thumb is to put short-term gain and long-term cost together. We remember that from Lateral case already, right? Because for a lot of time, we think, OK, this is what I'm going to gain. For example, I'm experimenting at the team level. I'm experimenting with team efficiency. I'm measuring the speed. Short-term, team is going way faster. Woohoo, experiment verified our assumption. But in reality, not necessarily. Because in long-term, maybe we did that because we reduced our quality, and it will get back chasing us with defects. So what's the long-term cost for it? So we want to have this bigger picture together. And we should be able to have a meaningful conversation when we track these metrics. If metrics go up or down, and we do not change our behavior, if we cannot act on it, most likely we just wasted our time collecting all of that information. It should have control factors. That sounds super boring, I know. But control factors are things that suppose not to change. And control factors are things that make it into a scientific method in a way that your experiment is reproducible. So if we really want to prove something, some impact, that if we do this, then that happens, it should be reproducible. But if we take the same control factors, if we simulate environment and do the same thing, we should be able to reproduce the result. Clear scope, then experiment starts, then it ends. What's the scope? Is it about one team? Is it about 10 teams? Is it about one target audience? Is it about multiple markets? What's the scope of this experiment? And now the last one has nothing to do with experiment design, but this is about being a good human being, actually. So here I want to pause for a second and break it to you, that experimenting is a privilege. It's the first time today when I actually said the sentence. And it's hard to admit because it's sort of already in our DNA that we have to experiment to move on. But in reality, this is investment. Our clients do not pay for us experimenting. They are paying for solution and value. This is a non-value added activity. If you know lean, that most likely should be cut out of it. But we're still doing it because we believe that it will pay off in the future. But your folks are paying salary you now. So being a good human being means that you should know who is potentially interested in results and being open enough to share them, right? So if you have some sort of manager who comes to you and says, I see you're doing interesting thing with your team. Could you knowledge share with another team? Just don't be mean, share it. Knowledge sharing is not that bad, okay? So that's just about being open about your results. Now, lateral thinking. Do you know what this term means? Very good. So I will be talking for the rest of the time about lateral thinking because my assumption is that the better questions we ask, the better answers we'll get. And from all of the things in experiment design, the most important is hypothesis, because it helps us do exactly that, right? This is the part where we state our assumption. And if we state same boring things, it will be very difficult to use these results to actually innovate. So lateral thinking as a theory was invented in 1960 by Edward Bono, but you will not remember the year or name. So I'm giving you an example, which some of you might already know. So this is a classical puzzle that asks you to link all 9 dots using 4 lines without lifting your hand. For people who already know it, I know that sounds super easy. But when it was introduced for a very first time, most of the people couldn't solve it. And the reason was because we think in pattern. We have underlying assumptions, sometimes even unconsciously, about things, how we operate. And that's fine. It's OK to have them because it helps to make decisions faster, but it's not helping to be creative. So the people who managed to break the pattern, who managed to challenge this unspoken assumption that you cannot cross the borders of the square, solved it in no time. So lateral thinking is basically about that. Lateral thinking is our capacity to break our typical thinking pattern and come up with a creative solution that would not be possible using typical thinking flow, typical logical deduction method, right? And I will be sharing techniques from lateral thinking that you can add to your toolbox and start using immediately, even today, to start asking better questions and challenge the status quo around you. That's the purpose of a session. So in 1968, Mexico City was holding Olympic Games. People were happily watching athletes doing high jumps. And most of these athletes, what they did, they were basically, doing this run and then approaching the obstacle with a front. And suddenly one guy called Dick, he just broke this pattern. And he was running, and then he suddenly flipped and he approached the obstacle from the other side with his back. What he did basically, he broke the assumption that we should approach the obstacle with the front. He asked what if the opposites were true. He took the gold medal that year and he created a perfect example of innovation, because after trying this, nobody got back to the old ways. They didn't know that we need this, but once they tried it, now it's the most popular way to do high jumps. And this question is one of the most powerful questions you can have. First thing, easy to remember. Second things, work at any layer. A lot of time, especially when I work with C-level, I have this, please do not gamify things vibe, right? We're serious people in there. So this question sounds serious enough, so you can bring it to any level. And you can use it personally as well. If you get tired of one question, you can use alternatives. What's the one thing we absolutely should not do in this situation? What would happen if we break this rule? What we don't want to achieve? All of these questions should bring you to a conversation about our assumption of the link between I do this, and that concludes that, and why it's good or bad. And we can question each of these parts. I can question the action, I can question the outcome, I can question my evaluation of the outcome. And when I say that it can work at a personal level, I really want to share my personal story. So when I started my career, some people might know already, I didn't originally start it in tech. And as a typical generalist who doesn't know what to do, I was switching a lot of jobs. So in first 7 years of my career, I changed either role or title or company or industry every year. So my personal motto was every year a new career. Like every year, I'm just changing it and looking for myself, like what I'm gonna do. And from all of these changes, the most difficult change was actually breaking into tech. So when I decided when I want to do this, I started looking for positions. So I applied for project manager, technical project manager, IT project manager, all of these types of roles, delivery lead, scrum master, product owner, product manager. To be honest, I couldn't tell a difference at the time. I just looked for any job description that had at least 20% of overlap of what I could actually do. And the typical pattern for me was that I got into interview, and I got in because I managed to write a very creative cover letter which has a punchline in the end, don't be a potato. Of course, you would hire somebody, like invite for an interview if they said it to you. And yeah, I got in, I managed to do that, but then they start asking technical questions. I have no idea how to answer. I get full defense, and really soon we split our ways, knowing that we will probably not meet each other again. And I didn't like the pattern, but it was as it was. And I received an invitation for an interview for a Scrum Master. And I checked the job description, it's like, okay, I have to take this one, because this is Lithuania. And actually, Scrum Master position, at the time I was doing this break into tech thing, was a rare position. So if I'm not getting this one, it might take another year to have an opportunity to participate in such interview. So how do I break the pattern? So if a pattern is that they make the first impression of me based on questions I cannot answer, how do I navigate the conversation differently? And I got into the room and I said, hello, my name is Agne. Currently, I'm reading this amazing book about things that don't make sense. Have you heard about it? And I was like, but then we sort of got interested and we started discussing. And actually, this book is really good. I added it because most of the time in conferences, people recommend same books all the time. Have you read Team Topologies? Yeah, everybody. So this is something new, potentially. So this is the book about ideas that don't make sense. And we started talking about how do we actually generate these ideas? How do we come up with creative solutions? Why we think that they don't make sense when suddenly they do? What kind of cultural shift it requires? What's the leadership role in that? And then it was my moment. I got it. I got this insight. What if the opposite were true? What if the fact that I have zero knowledge in technology is not a drawback? What if the fact that I have zero knowledge is an advantage? And I started selling so hard, like, who can ask better questions? Who can challenge status quo more? Who can, try to draw all of the processes better than a person who has no idea how it's supposed to work? It's Eureka moment, because the team will not get offended. It's not that I'm trying to, ask them the things we already know. I don't know. Can you tell me how it works? Is it supposed to work that way? And having these conversations revealed a lot of things that are not supposed to work that way, because we could actually explicitly talk about it, because I was a person allowed to ask stupid questions, because I don't know, and it's okay. That's the purpose of it, right? So I solved it. So if you want to switch career, that's your move. You can take it. Now, of course, I can't leave you with just one question in a toolbox, because it's not a toolbox, and it's just one question in your pocket. So another practice you can use is a random starting point. And this specific practice is structured to help us stop thinking in our typical sequence. Because most of the time when we have a problem, we start from the same, brainstorming point, and then we retrace sort of autopilot thinking, right? We just get into this, okay, I always do it like that. So this question, it's not a question, it's practice, random starting point, will help you to stop your thinking autopilot and get you into active thinking mode. So how it works it doesn't allow you to start thinking from a regular point where you would naturally. For example, I'm going on vacation in a month. How do I spend my holiday? And I generate a random word. Because otherwise, what would I do is to look at the forecast, to see that it's super cold in Lithuania, then look into south countries that are a little bit warmer, buy tickets, and have another holiday by the pool. That's a typical flow. That will just happen forever unless I break it, unless I go out of my autopilot. So I generate a random word, which was bond. Now, the question for the audience, what first association you have? How this word, what kind of ideas are coming to your mind when you read bond? How you can use that to plan your vacation? Hiking, okay. James Bond, okay, okay. Connection. Okay. Actually, you covered my ideas as well. So, you see, if we start at the same point, we still have thinking patterns, right? So my background is in financial economy, so my first association was this one. So what do I do? Maybe I invest, or maybe I rent my house and a house swap and get some money, right? All of that stuff. Then, of course, I have some bonds. I have family, I have friends, I have fellow speakers from conferences all around the world. Why wouldn't I visit them? And James Bond, I mean, who would miss that? Who would miss that? Right? So maybe I can use it to investigate my business opportunities, my career opportunities, or just sit on a couch and read a novel. It's a holiday. It's okay to read. Just read. That's fine. Idea is that it helps to break the typical starting point and thus generate different ideas. And it works really well at the team level. Actually, I'm using it as a retrospective exercise. How do I use it? For example, your team is not happy about refinements or plannings. This is a very typical thing, right? And you see that the team somehow is anxious, and they sort of already know what they have to do, and they know that somebody else has to improve because somebody else is not bringing the information they need. And we are not in the mood that would really help us figure out how do we solve it as a team. So you generate the word, and you can have a conversation. And I tried with multiple teams, actually. And it worked pretty well. No matter what kind of words we generate, most of the time we came up with the creative ways, different all the time because different words, but creative associations, how we can work as a team to improve the experience for the whole team. And you can either generate one word and then come up with as many ideas as possible. You can generate word for each of the team member. You can play with different questions. It's a really interactive retro format. You can use it. And now, a different point of view. So for this one, you have papers. So this is my gift for you. You will not have to do anything with it right now. But why I wanted to print it out, because this specific game is not just a game to make us more creative in thinking process. This game has a side effect, which is building empathy. And empathy, as we know, is one of the top leadership skills. And I check the audience, and I know that each of you is leader here. So you are my target audience. Why not to, increase your empathy today? So you can play this game when you're at home to practice. At work, how it works. Basically, you have a list of different types of people. You have an artist, you have scientists, you have a revolutionary leader, and the list goes on. And you need to think about one specific person, one name to add for each of these type of people. For example, artist for me is Frida Kahlo. I can associate with her somehow. Brilliant scientist is Marie Curie. Revolutionary leader is Landsbergis. I'm from Lithuania, so others probably don't know. Great doctor, never remember names of doctors. But I watch Dr. House, so that will work. This will be Dr. House, okay? If you don't know the name, don't sweat. Just leave it blank, okay? Don't worry about it. Idea is that you put people you can associate with. And then you pick a problem and you get wild. You try to think how that person would solve this problem. Exaggerate as much as possible, right? Be really bold. And you can't just do it with one person. You can go through different persons. The whole idea of this is that we expand our horizon. is that we become aware of the opportunities, of the scale of opportunities, which a lot of times we're not aware of. I remember we were doing dynamic reteaming event, and we figured that we should allow our teams to self-select into the teams we will be working with. I felt so good. Like, I'm so empowering. I allow these people to choose what we want to work with. And then I checked, like, what's the scale? And I realized that I'm merely hitting the middle of a scale, actually. Because, yes, on the one side, we're managers who would just restructure the teams without teams being informed, and they would just have to do it. But on the other side, there were teams who could self-organize into different teams based on purpose without even informing their managers. So knowing the spectrum is helping to figure out what kind of solution we can have. And having this particular game actually helped with business problem as well. I remember once we had a situation where we had a quite difficult defect from the market, and we gathered together as a team, and we were like, sorry, it will take at least 3 weeks. It's a little complicated. And we're like, shit, what do we do? So we did this. And after doing that, we went through the artist thinking phase, and we realized that, oh, but what if we do not code at all? What if we just change the format, like what's written? What if we change the way we explain our client how it's supposed to be done? And that would fix the experience for now. And that worked. And that was really, really quick fix. And the feedback was so good, we didn't even need to do that coding later, right? So it sounds like a game, but if you're serious about gaming, it can really bring you some good ideas in there. So for that reason, on your paper, you have 4 problem statements I encourage you to play with when you're at home. For one thing, you will learn how to expand your horizon. For another thing, you will build some of your empathy. And problems are different. I generated based on my today's association. One's about electric cars. So how do we develop self-driving car technology that's affordable and safe? How do we reduce production costs and maintain the quality? So if you pick that problem, think about your product, right? Make it yours. How can we reduce stigma around mental health? We had Mental Health Day, I think, last week, right? That's an important topic. How can we enhance quality of education in some of the disadvantaged areas? That's an important topic in Lithuania as well, education. We had some teach protests, right? So pick any of that, and this is something you can do and play around. Now, do you still remember why we started talking about lateral thinking? Oh, there are people who still remember. Cool, because we really got into this, toolbox, ask this question, ask that question. So we started thinking about lateral thinking because we agreed that for good performance, it's not enough to reduce errors, but we need innovation. And now this is backwards thinking, right? So for innovation, we need experimentation. Experimentation enables innovation. And to make these experiments better, most likely, we need creative hypotheses. Now, there is another problem. We might have really good ideas. We might raise really nice hypotheses. This is still thinking phase. Sometimes we do not manage to transition from thinking to actually practicing something, to doing something. There might be different reasons. Maybe too many controls and procedures, right? It's just too difficult to run an experiment. Maybe your ideas are being filtered out, right? Or you don't have a right person, you don't have a decision maker in your discussion. Or maybe our organization is just unwilling to act on your insights. So I want to give you one last yet very powerful question to your toolbox that should help you to go from thinking into actually doing, from having a good idea into testing a good idea. Is it safe to try? This question is a door opener for a meaningful conversation, why we're not doing this. We have all of these procedures, so most likely we had some troubles in the past, but are they still relevant? How do we overcome these risks? How can we make it safe? If we're filtering out ideas, or if we're not willing to act, why? Is it like a personal reason? Is it organizational reason? Maybe there is actually a risk. Maybe we need to change the experiment design. And it's okay, we can descope it. Maybe we don't need to start running this idea with 8 teams. It's okay to start with 1. Maybe we don't need to roll out this product globally. Maybe we can start with particular, country or particular target audience. It's okay. But now we are having a conversation that's supposed to make us act, right? So this is the last one for your toolbox. So let's have a wrap-up. To build a high-performing organization, reducing errors is not enough, right? We need to think not only backwards, how to be better at what we already know is working, but forward, what will happen? The world is moving on. To do that, we need to experiment, and we need to stop being afraid of experiments. Having an experiment that disqualifies an idea is not a failure. It's a huge learning stepping stone. So we aim to create as many learning opportunities as possible to drive our organization forward. And lateral thinking suggests that there are ways to actually break our typical thinking pattern to ask better questions. Because the better questions we ask, the better answers we'll get. Thank you for that. Don't forget to connect. You will be able to ask questions. And now I want to do one last thing with you. So I know that Agile Lithuania is asking audience to share their feedback. So I'm going to generate a random word for you if you want. You can share random feedback, but if you want to play, I'm just generating a word for you, and you can write your feedback based on that. So what's the word, Gabriela? Bridge. The word is bridge. I'm waiting for your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Agne. As you shared some questions for us, how we should think, so maybe the audience has as well some questions to Agne. Okay, so then I have one from the app.
Okay.
Long one.
Ooh.
So what blocks people from trying a new approach is probably influenced by the sunk cost fallacy. Mm-hmm. Actually, the electric vehicle example may fall into this category. It's inconvenient to admit we invested time and money into some suboptimal. What kind of techniques you find to lower this bias?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Actually, sunk cost bias is one of the most popular. I spot it at all the levels, including leadership, so it's not that we somehow outgrown it. And I think it's a little bit like, for example, playing poker, right? Then you already put so much money that you're afraid to just pass at some point. So first thing then you need to get over bias all the time is to acknowledge it. So awareness is the step number 1. So if somebody is saying that potentially this is this bias in the organization, so that's a very good start, and that person should really help organization to see that. And then we are evaluating a future. We are evaluating from the point where we are now, right? We cannot change our decisions that we made in the past, and we're here, right? Maybe today we wouldn't have invested all that money, but we already did, and it's done. And now we are here. We have this money left. We have this request, what needs to be done, and we need to make choices from where we are. So my advice for all coaches, from product people, meet the situation where it is, right? If it's a team, meet your team where we are. If it's your stakeholder, meet stakeholder where we are, and talk, okay, so we acknowledge we really invested that much, but it's not helping to make a decision about the future. So what do we have now, right? And what things we can change for future, so maybe we would achieve better result. But it's a hard thing to do. This bias is one of the strongest. So, of course, I don't have a good answer for that. Maybe we need to ask some psychologists. I don't know.
Okay, thank you, Agne.
Okay, thank you.
For your time.